Tad O'Malley here from O'Malley & Langen. If you're used to wearing these, and now you're stuck home wearing these, you may have a disability that prevents you from working. Call us at O'Malley & Langen. We can help you get the Social Security benefits that you've earned. Good morning and welcome to You Be the Judge. Today we're really proud to have with us a congressman from northeastern Pennsylvania, 11th Congressional District?
17th.
17th. They change so often.
Every 10 years.
Matt Cartwrite. Matt is not only a longtime friend, but he's one of the great advocates for the consumer in the U.S. Congress. And Matt, there's a lot happening today in Congress. You guys are going to have to make a tough decision on the treaty or the agreement that the president's entering into with Iran. And I was surprised to see our speaker come out very strongly in support of the president, a little different than Chuck Schumer in the Senate.
Yeah, it seems like he's got some ground to make up for the way he handled Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech. You know, about a month ago now, Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu came to Washington and he gave a speech to a joint session of Congress. Ordinarily, when a head of state does that, they clear it with our head of state, the President of the United States. They did not get White House clearance for that speech ahead of time. And instead, they just took the invitation from John Boehner, the Speaker of the House, and ran with it without getting permission or clearance from the White House. A lot of people had their noses out of joint over that.
It looked almost like a State of the Union with the Republicans jumping up and giving them standing ovations and the Democrats with folded arms.
In some spots, I think that's true. In fact, a lot of the Democrats, Todd, actually boycotted that speech. I didn't boycott it. I did sign on to a letter lodging my objection with Speaker Boehner for going about this terrible breach of protocol and not securing clearance from the White House first. But I wasn't going to boycott. That's just not who I am. I think that, you know, you don't want to send a larger signal. I mean, maybe you're angry at Speaker Boehner. Maybe you're not too happy with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But it's larger than that. In my view, this is America's staunchest ally. And just to turn your back and boycott a speech by the Prime Minister of Israel, I mean, going back to Harry Truman, there should be no daylight between Israel and the United States, and I feel very strongly about that, so I went to the speech.
You know, when I saw the invitation by the Speaker and really the politicization of our foreign policy, there used to be a rule that we don't have politics at from the water's edge on. That's where the Democrats and Republicans unite to support the president. And I was disappointed.
I was too, and there was a great hue and cry over it. And I think, to his credit, John Boehner listened. And I think that may be what we're seeing now is kind of a penitent John Boehner coming back to the table and realizing he's got to support the president. You know, that's the House. Then we have the people in the Senate, you know, those 47 Republican senators who wrote a letter to Iran saying, well, we're not following this fellow in the White House. That's unprecedented. It's unbelievable that they did that. And I was happy to see actually Senator John McCain walk back from that position. They all need to grow up a little bit, those 47 senators.
You know, and lost in all this, I think, is the absolute masterful job that John Kerry did. And people think about it's U.S. and Iran. It wasn't U.S. and Iran. It was U.S. and Russia and China and Great Britain and France and Germany. And he really did a fantastic job.
This is hard work, and these are big stakes. We have to make sure Iran does not get a nuclear bomb. because it's not just about Iran. It's the entire destabilization of the Middle East, further destabilization of the Middle East, because you know that if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, everybody else is going to want one, including Saudi Arabia. And there'll be you don't want some of these heads of state with the nuclear button within their arm's length, because some of them, they're not traveling through life hindered by the concerns that people like American presidents have.
It wasn't long ago that we were worried about loose nukes in the breakup of the Soviet Union. Can you imagine it in the Middle East with Libya and Syria? And it's frightening.
Right. So that's why John Kerry had this huge job to do, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I mean, Iran probably thinks they've just delayed it a little bit, and that they'll come back to seeking a bomb later on. And we recognize that, and we have to always keep our eyes on Iran in the future.
When we come back, I want to talk to you about your visit to Selma, because I was so impressed to see you there, and I think that's such an important part of our history. So please stay tuned to You Be the Judge. Todd O'Malley again. If you're hurt or sick, can't work, Social Security could be the answer. Grab your cell phone. Call the lawyers at O'Malley & Langen, 1-800-817-2667. And remember, we don't get paid unless you win.
For a veteran, the flash of a firework can be a flashback to war. While you're looking for the cereal, he's looking for an ambush. Our soldiers are leaving one battle and coming home to another. We're fighting a war against veteran suicide, and we're losing. In fact, 22 veterans take their own life each day. I know because I was almost one of them. I was U.S. Army paratrooper, Green Beret, eventually in Delta Force. I did 40 months of direct action combat. But I didn't come back the same man who had left 2 decades before. Everyone says, we're glad you're home safe. I wasn't. And many of our veterans are not. They're still at war. So this is your mission. Help us claim the 22. You can give our vets the hope and encouragement they need to get well. And it's as simple as a post or a tweet. Let's turn every 22 into a show of support. When you do, you're letting our vets know they have an army behind them. Let's win the war against veteran suicide.
Your mission begins at mission22.com.
Are you a veteran who is looking to improve your math and writing skills? Enroll in RVATS at Marywood University.
It's been about 7 years since I was in school, and upon completing the RVATS program, I feel that it really helped me with my confidence in taking courses here at Marywood University.
These are free, non-credit classes for veterans and their spouses. Use your new skills to get a job or go back to school.
So it is such a great opportunity, and I'm thankful for it.
Contact us to enroll in RVATS at Marywood University today.
Welcome back to You Be the Judge. My guest is Congressman Matt Cartwright. And Congressman, tell us a little bit about that trip down to Selma. That had to be just a really exciting time.
Well, sure. It was March 7, 1965. That was Bloody Sunday. Really a milestone in American history, a milestone in the history of the civil rights movement in our nation. And we just had the 50th anniversary of that. And I felt like Northeastern Pennsylvania ought to have a representative there for that. In fact, the only other member of Congress from Pennsylvania was Mike Kelly, a Republican out of Western Pennsylvania. And I got to know Mike a little better on the trip. But we had 100 members of Congress go. Of course, we had President Obama and the First Lady. We had George W. Bush and Laura Bush were there. It's a big deal because March 7, 1965 was when the Freedom Marchers went across the bridge in Selma, Alabama. They were met by armed to the teeth Alabama state troopers.
With dogs?
With dogs and fire hoses and billy clubs. And they savagely attacked these unarmed, nonviolent freedom marchers who were just exercising their First Amendment rights as American, expressing political opinion out in public. These savage attacks, that was nothing new, of course, in the South. But what was different that day was it was on TV. It was televised. In fact, the evening news that night on March 7, 1965, showed these savage attacks by armed Alabama state troopers against citizens of this nation. People were repulsed by that. They were horrified. Americans from coast to coast saw that on the evening news, and within a week, that spun federal policy on its head. And President Lyndon Johnson announced in a speech to Congress that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was something he was going to get behind. And in fact, that was passed within 4 months. The end of Jim Crow voting restrictions, all of that in the South. In fact, it was, we were talking before about the Supreme Court of the United States about 3 years ago, gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965 because they decided, well, look, that was 50 years ago, and there have been advances made in the Deep South jurisdictions where all of the Jim Crow voter suppression laws were occurring. You need to revamp the map for what are the jurisdictions where there are voter suppression efforts going on. We've seen it here in Pennsylvania.
Sure we have.
So I take that as face value, and I'm so proud that Assistant Democratic Leader in the House, James Clyburn of South Carolina, asked me to join his task force, which is the Voter Engagement and Outreach Task Force. And part of what we're doing is pushing for the amendment of the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Our majority leader in the House of Representatives in Pennsylvania, a fellow from Western Pennsylvania, spoke a little too quickly about how they were going to help defeat Barack Obama by passing the voter ID law in Pennsylvania. And really, it gave everyone in the country an opportunity to see exactly what's behind all of these changes in our voters' laws, because the fraud was non-existent, but they were making an issue of it.
Well, that's right, Todd, and to their credit, it was the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania that struck down the voter ID laws in this Commonwealth. And look, we're talking about a sacred right, the right to vote in this country, and people get that in America. And when people of one party or another try to suppress votes, well, it's usually one party doing that. Yeah. But when people are engaged in voter ID laws, under the, we're all worried about voter fraud, but there isn't really very much of that. And what's in it for the average American citizen to run out and vote twice? You don't hear too much about actual instances of voter fraud, but what we do hear about is voter suppression. Keeping elderly people, keeping senior citizens from voting because they haven't had a driver's license renewed in quite a while. Things like that. That's wrong. We need to keep vigilant about protecting that sacred right to vote in this country.
I was in North Dakota, or not North Carolina, about 8 months ago, speaking to a good friend of mine, and I was down at an environmental conference. And they were just going through all of the changes that the new Republican House and Republican governor was going to put on their electoral system, not allowing the Saturday and Sunday voting, cutting the voting period down. I mean, that's so enlightened. Let's make it easier and increase the length of time that people can vote, to encourage people to vote. We want, we talk about Hitler being elected by a small majority of the people in Germany. We want large majorities electing the people in the United States of America so that we don't have those kind of problems.
That's one of our jobs on that task force, is to remind people not only do you have the sacred right to vote, but you have an obligation to get out there and vote as Americans, because evil triumphs when good men do nothing, and that counts for women too. But for example, in Oregon, they just came out with a law. Automatic registration. You get a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote, cutting down on the kind of the hoops you have to jump through to be able to vote.
We're going to take a break now, but I'd like to talk to you about a topic that you've been very much involved with in the House, and that's the Social Security, Medicare problems, and fixing it and making sure that it's available for everyone. So please stay tuned to You Be the Judge. Hi, I'm Todd O'Malley with the law offices of O'Malley and Langen. If I say the phrase life-changing experience, what do you think? Getting married, having a baby, buying a home, all good things. I'll bet you didn't think work injury, and that's a problem with our society. People don't realize a work injury can change everything, destroy your earning power, hurt your family, and damage your health. If you're hurt on the job, call O'Malley and Langen, 1-800-817-COMP.